Patreon page. Here we will provide you with the sports betting tips, picks, and information in order for you to become a successful gambler. We have 5 packages that I think really do an incredible job of providing the information tailored to you, what you want, and what your sports betting needs are. For more information, reach out to the TWSN team, but we have a ton of stuff coming your way. Content from fantasy football, sports betting for UFC, NBA, NHL, and of course, the NFL. We are so excited to be able to bring this service to you, and let us know if there's any more information you need.
Get up, let me begin. This is TWSN. You ain't heard about us yet, well you better know now because it's the place that it all goes down on.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Right Way Sports Network YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us here once again on the TWSN Tailgate Show. My name is Matt Levine and I am joined by my co-host Anthony Ravasio. Harrison unfortunately could not be with us this week again, but we believe he will be back next week and going forward.
He better.
What was that, Anthony? What was that?
I said he better.
He better be. Yeah, I know. We have some discussions we need to have with him. But how are you doing today, Anthony?
I'm good, Matt. I hope you're doing good too. I've had a good week. But before we start, I definitely wanted to talk to everyone that's watching about the TWSN Patreon page. I give picks to the TWSN Patreon page. It's a betting service that we have. We have a good amount of subscribers, and we have a positive win clip so far. We've been making a lot of people some money. I give picks to the betting service, and personally, my college football picks are at a 60% win clip as of this season so far. So I definitely would advise you to subscribe to that betting service. You're going to make money if you do, and yeah, come join the family.
No, we definitely have a very high success rate here. I've never seen people hit this many times. It's really impressive. So yes, please join the Patreon. Help yourself. We will help you make money. And you know what? Join the Patreon. It's good for everybody. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button below. Exactly. We have so many people who just love looking this stuff up and making their informed picks and helping people. And I think that's what we love here at TWSN. But you know what, Anthony? We have a lot to get into. We have a lot of really fun games this weekend. But as we do every Saturday here on the TWSN Tailgate Show, we start with the Saturday statement because we feel like we need to, call out someone or hype someone up or something. So let's start with that. Anthony, what is your Saturday statement for today?
So I'm going to stray away a little bit from the usual Saturday statement when we just call it a team or like even a player or a coach. I'm going to go and call out a position. I'm going to call it the quarterback position this week. Look at some of the quarterback matchups and the quarterbacks that are playing, some bad teams or quarterbacks that need to prove their worth. For example, we got we got Arkansas versus Georgia. We've got KJ Jefferson versus JT Daniels. What a quarterback matchup in that game. It's like I see KJ Jefferson as like a newer Cam Newton. That's what I mean. Even some of the analysts are comparing him to Cam Newton. We've got Ole Miss, Alabama. We've got Matt Corral versus Bryce Young. 2 Heisman quarterback matchups. They're both candidates. Cincinnati, you got Desmond Ridder. He's trying to prove that both him and Cincinnati, he's a Heisman candidate, and Cincinnati's a college football playoff team for sure. So today is the day of the quarterback. I want to see some good, high-scoring affairs. I want to see, quarterbacks balling out. I'm calling out quarterbacks for my Saturday statement.
All right, I love it. We do have a lot of good quarterback matchups, a lot of good games today, so I love that from a Saturday statement. For mine, I'm going to stick with the team. I am focusing on the Oklahoma State football team here. Coming off a huge win against Kansas State last week, they're welcoming in Baylor, who upset Iowa State last week. And they have a chance to make another statement here. Win this game, you go into your off week with a 5-0 record. I mean, and you still have matchups against Texas, Iowa State, West Virginia, and Oklahoma still. So getting this win now can really solidify them as a possible contending team in this conference. And they honestly don't overlook Baylor because Baylor may not be the greatest team, but they are still ranked, obviously. They just took down Iowa State. This crowd is going to be fired up. So match that energy. Come out early, match that energy. Don't let this Baylor team get going. And honestly, Oklahoma State controls its own destiny here, because if they win out or they win most of those games, they could have a potential path to a playoff appearance if they win. Oklahoma has not looked overly impressive this year. So maybe this is the year Oklahoma State takes over a little bit. You never know. I mean, this team looks pretty good. The playoff committee might have some hard decisions if Oklahoma State keeps winning. But it starts with this game today in front of your home fans. So make sure and get that job done and don't come out flat. Match the energy of your fans. That is my
Gundy can get it done.
Oklahoma State. What was
that? Gundy can get it done.
Gundy can get it done. Believe in Gundy. Okay, but let's move on. Let's talk about that Arkansas and A&M game we saw last week. As we always do, we like to recap our game of the days here. Arkansas snapped a 9-game losing streak to A&M last week, and they showed that their early success beating Texas may not have been a fluke. They jumped out to a 17-0 lead and ended up winning 20-10. It was behind their defense. I mean, KJ Jefferson did go out of the game, and the offense stalled a little bit. But that defense showed up, and they shut down that A&M team. They only held them to 272 yards of total offense for the entire game, and they showed they can play with some of these better teams. I mean, people thought this A&M team could potentially go to the playoff and maybe beat Alabama after everything from last year. But this Razorback team sacked Zach Calzada 3 times, pressured him 8 times, and 9 tackles for loss. That's a big game for this Arkansas defense. What was your takeaways from this game? Yeah,
so first of all, Arkansas came out of nowhere this year. I'm loving it. They played Georgia this week. They're suddenly a force to be reckoned with in the SEC, and I like it a lot. It's good to finally have some Arkansas football, prominent again. KJ Jefferson is an animal. I've already said he reminds me of a prime Auburn Cam Newton, just the way he's so gritty. He threw for 202 yards and 2 long touchdowns before he got hurt. And that was against an A&M defense that hadn't allowed a passing score at all this year before he got injured. He came back into the game with the last drive or two and trucked the defender for the game-sealing first down. I would love it. He looked exactly like Cam Newton. And I was like, this is like, if there is a player comparison in all of college football to anyone in the pros right now that's the most prominent, it's KJ Jefferson to Cam Newton. Isaiah Sproul looks great for the Aggies still, but besides for the one long run, the defense has definitely controlled the game. You said already that Arkansas had 9 tackles for loss. I want to talk about this offense a little bit for Arkansas too. The Aggies had allowed 232 passing yards in the first 3 games total. KJ Jefferson put up 229 at halftime.
Yeah, it was very.
So this offense definitely is legit. And going into Georgia this week, against a good Georgia pass defense, it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep it up. As for Texas A&M, they didn't look too hot. Zach Calzada did not look good. It's disappointing for sure because they definitely did have playoff hopes. Haynes King is still out. He's going to be out for the next few weeks. All Arkansas had to do was rush 3 guys and drop 8 because of how dominant their defensive line was against the A&M pass protection as well, and how poorly Calzada played, and he was flustered. He couldn't get anything done. So those are my takeaways from Arkansas, Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean, it was just I wonder if Jefferson doesn't go down, are we talking about a potential blowout for Arkansas rather than just the 10-point win? Because they were dominating A&M. Like, they were straight up dominating this Aggie team before he went down. It makes sense when
the only thing
that you might stall a little.
The only thing that got Texas A&M going was that long run by Spiller. What happens if that doesn't happen either?
I mean, Spiller's been one of the few bright spots for this A&M team. He's been keeping them afloat. They struggled against Colorado, and I understand King went down with the injury, but they've been very inconsistent, especially on offense. And coming to the season, a lot of people had this team potentially making the playoff or possibly upsetting Alabama. And now when they play each other, I mean, do we really think this A&M team can even hang with this Alabama team? Because I really don't, from what I've seen so far. But it's like, and they still have a lot of tough opponents. They still have to play, like I said, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss. That is a brutal schedule for them. This could be a lost season for the Aggies when they had so much hope coming into the year. But anything else you want to talk about for that game last week?
Not really. I mean, I think we basically touched on it all. Arkansas, to me, looks like a team that can seriously compete in the SEC with anyone. I absolutely cannot wait to see what happens with them in Georgia this week, which is what we're going to be getting into next.
Right. Yeah, so speaking of that game, that is our game of the day. Arkansas Razorbacks against the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens. That atmosphere is going to be, wild. It's always wild out in Athens. What a matchup, though, because Arkansas, like you said, they came out of nowhere. And now they look like a legit team. And if they can beat Georgia today, would be huge, not only for this season, but for the program, because imagine the recruitment they could get with this. It's like, Arkansas has always been like that middle of the pack or bottom team. But if they beat Georgia now after just beating A&M, that right there is a selling point for potential recruits going.
This is probably their biggest game. This is probably their biggest game in the 2000s, I would say.
Yeah,
at least.
Exactly. So it's like Arkansas obviously is going to want to come out. Sam Pittman's going back to Georgia, where he was the offensive line coach. And again, we can pinpoint the success for this Arkansas team to the trenches. I mean, their offensive line's playing well, their defensive line's playing well. And I feel like this could be a good game because, they typically play each other okay. And KJ Jefferson should be back, which we've seen he's been explosive, like you talked about. What do you think for this game today?
Well, first of all, the line for this game opened up at 19.5, which was as much of a surprise to me as it was to everyone else. The main question coming out of that was, is Georgia that good? And to me, I don't think so. I liked Arkansas plus 19.5 from the start. Now, I don't know if you heard this yesterday, Matt, but JT Daniels is questionable, and now they don't think he's going to play, which is huge for Georgia. The line moved down to 16.5 as of last night. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I don't know if Stetson Bennett could take Georgia to the promised land against a relatively good Arkansas team. But when Arkansas has the ball, they need to capitalize on the rush for sure. Arkansas is number one in rushing attempts, yards per carry, and yards per game on the ground in the SEC. But Georgia counters with the SEC's number one rush defense and headlined by Jordan Davis, their All-American nose tackle. They need to run the ball well to win the game. KJ Jefferson obviously provides that second option in the run. He's the second leading rusher behind Traylon Smith, who was another really good rusher for Arkansas. Third downs are huge as well. Georgia's allowing conversions on 28.1%, and Arkansas ranks 13th in the SEC. So if there's a matchup that we need to look at the most, it's third downs when Arkansas has the ball against Georgia. Because this defense, we know about the Georgia defense. We know how good they are. And we know the Arkansas offense is good too, off of last week. But they haven't played a defense as good as Georgia's. At least, A&M's is great, but Georgia's is on another level. We saw what they did to Clemson, even though Clemson doesn't look as good as they do now. As they did, week one. But yeah, Jefferson needs to be great for Arkansas to win the game. But when Georgia has the ball, they get Washington back. They've averaged 7 yards a play since the Clemson game. Daniels will be tested if he plays. Arkansas ranks third in passing defense efficiency. And Arkansas contained the run well. So Zamir White and Cook need to break through in order for Georgia to win. Personally, I don't think that Arkansas can pull it out. They cannot be sloppy at all. They can't really have any turnovers. They need to limit the penalties. They need to be on the same page almost the whole game. And to me, that seems like such a tall task against the second-best team and arguably the best team in the nation. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go – as much as I want Arkansas to win, I'm going to have to go with Georgia winning. I'm going to say by 6. I think they easily cover. Arkansas easily covers, but I think Georgia ends up pulling it out.
Yeah, I do agree. I think that Arkansas needs to play the perfect game if they want to take down the number 2 team in the country, because Georgia is not going to beat themselves, if that makes sense. Or at least they usually don't beat themselves. So Arkansas can't beat themselves. So Arkansas is going to have to run the ball well. They're going to have to hit that long play down the field, stop them on third down. and win the turnover battle. Like I said, it's going to have to be a perfect game for this Arkansas team. And I'm kind of on the same, mindset as you. I don't know. I think Georgia actually beats them by 2 scores. But I will say this. If Arkansas wins this game, I am not doubting them the rest of the year. Like, never. I don't care who they play. I don't care who they play. Because if they can go into Athens and win this game, I might take Arkansas against anybody. Because Georgia, a lot of people think Georgia might be the best team in the country other than Alabama. And if they can go into their home field and beat them, sky's the limit for this Razorbacks team.
Agreed.
And they have a tough
It's a tall task
coming up. This has been a brutal stretch for this Arkansas team. They got A&M last week. They're playing Georgia today. They're at Ole Miss. They're home against Auburn. Like, that is a really tough back-to-back-to-back stretch for this team. And like we talked about last week, if they can even just go 2-2, that's huge. They already got 1 win. So if they can go and beat Georgia, that would be incredible for them. But I am going with the Bulldogs to win this game. I do think they are the better team, and I think Arkansas's time is coming. It's just not this year, if that makes sense. But let's keep it going. We have another really fun game here. We have the Ole Miss going into Tuscaloosa, taking on the Alabama Crimson Tide here. The Ole Miss offense is going to be the key in this game because they've shown an ability to score. I mean, they put up 48 on Bama last season when nobody could touch that Bama team whatsoever. Florida put up points against them last year also, but other than that, who really did anything against that Bama team? I know it's different players and different everything, but still, that means something when it was just last season. Lane Kiffin is that kind of coach who could potentially, I could see beating Bama because he has these guys ready to go. And Ole Miss has this shot at a potential playoff path if they win today. Under Kiffin, this Ole Miss team ranks first in the FBS in points and yards. And Matt Corral looks like an early Heisman favorite. And a win here firmly puts him in the for that trophy. Yeah. So a win here, like, who's really beating him, is assuming he keeps this up. What are your thoughts about this game going into today?
Matt Levine, you want to hear my thoughts? Ole Miss is going to win. I told you this a few days ago.
Ole Miss is going to win, guys.
I tweeted it out. 2 days ago. They're going to win. It's as much as people think it's a tall task to beat this godly Alabama team. To me, I don't think they're as godly as they are as year past. Ole Miss has more than effectively shown the ability to score. Their offense can more than keep up with Alabama. They lead FBS in total yards at 653 yards a game, which is insane. Ole Miss is coming off of a bye. The Alabama D hasn't faced a multi-dimensional offense like the Ole Miss offense all year. They've got Corral as a Heisman candidate, and then they got Ely in the backfield, who's arguably an All-American. The defense has even improved from last year. They're not a laughingstock they were like last year, but they're way more athletic and speedy. And Lane, you touched on Lane Kiffin. If anyone could beat Alabama, it's Lane Kiffin. And you can knock out Ole Miss's first 3 games, putting up insane numbers against Tulane, two other mid-major or FCS teams that they've played. But it doesn't really matter. Alabama's done the same thing. Louisville also, right? I mean, and look at Alabama last week. They melted down against Florida, who to me is not a great team. I mean, they're good, but they're completely one-dimensional. All they do is run the ball. The greatest, Alabama has weaknesses. People like, oh, Alabama's this, Alabama that. No, I mean, they can be beaten. To me, Georgia's a better team, and Georgia could be beaten this week too. Florida ran all over them last week, 245 yards of rushing. And Ole Miss's running game has been unstoppable to me, and they're even better than Florida's rushing game. Florida outgained Bama last week by more than 100 yards and almost beat them as well. This is going to be a firefight of epic proportions, and I cannot wait to watch this game. This is probably the game I'm looking forward to the most. The over-under, Matt Levine, is set at 80.5, which to me, I have not seen a higher total of points set. That means that means people think that both teams can put up 40 points, and that's just an average, So to me, Ole Miss pulls off the upside here.
All right. I love that pick. Like you said, Alabama can't be beat. I mean, they haven't been perfect this season. We've seen it. But this is the chance to rectify that at home. Ole Miss has a penalty problem. We're gonna look down on this Ole Miss team for anything, they have a penalty problem. And the same thing I said about Georgia. If you're going to beat them, you can't beat yourselves because Alabama is not going to do that. Like you just cannot do that. And if that trend continues for Ole Miss, this is not going to be a close game at all. But if Ken Corral mess around and beat this Bama team, we've seen quarterbacks do it in the past. Johnny Manziel did it. Joe Burrow did it. And a few others have.
I was just going to say that. Money Manziel.
Like his thing. But I think he can do it again if everything goes perfect, much like Arkansas. But I'm trusting Saban and the Crimson Tide to hold serve at home here. I do think it's going to be a close game. I'm taking Bama by about 10 because I think Ole Miss can hang with them. I like this Ole Miss team. I just think that Alabama is just a little better. But I will say this: if Ole Miss beats Alabama, I'm getting slight 2019 LSU vibes from this Ole Miss team. But they need to show me that they can beat Bama. If they do that, like kind of like Arkansas, I'm really not going to go against them the rest of the year. Because
at the beginning of the year, they were my team. When we went over the underrated teams in each conference, I was like, Ole Miss. They were barely outside the top 25, which to me was a mistake. I feel like they were definitely a top 25 team, just with Ely coming back and Corral coming back. I mean, obviously their defense was an issue, but this was the team to me that could make serious waves in the SEC. And I obviously no one saw Arkansas coming, but let's add another team to the mix. I think Ole Miss could easily do this.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely going to be a good game, and we'll see what happens here. But let's keep this going. We have a lot of games to get through here. Let's talk about Michigan and Wisconsin, because honestly, other than Clemson, has there been a team that's underperformed more than Wisconsin has? We came into this year seeing them as potential favorites in the Big Ten, but that narrative has changed very quickly. Graham Mertz has really struggled, and maybe it was a mistake for them to pick him over Jack Cohen, who just beat them last week with Notre Dame. Mertz needs to be better. Is this the game where he shows his true potential? What are your thoughts about this game?
Yeah, so it sucks because Graham Mertz, I've been cheering for him. Everyone's been cheering for him to do well. Last week he just did not do well, especially in the fourth quarter. He threw 2 pick sixes. I mean, and Notre Dame just ended up blowing them out late in that game. Wisconsin still looks good. I mean, both teams feature 2 strong defenses and 2 great offensive lines. They both have been relatively bad at throwing, so they've gone away from it at least. Michigan especially has gone away from it, and they're still at 4-0 still, so they have found a way to run the ball and win effectively. Cade McNamara beat Rutgers for Michigan last week when they were loading the box, but you can't really do that now when you're going against the nation's number 1 overall defense. Wisconsin's only allowed 69 rush yards in 3 games, which is unheard of.
Which is that's insane.
Luckily for Michigan, their O-line's pretty good. It's among the best. So they could definitely try to get the running going. If not, Cade's going to have to try to dice through that Wisconsin defense. Mertz has looked, again, terrible. And honestly, this game's going to be decided on him. It depends on how many games he plays, good or bad, Mertz is going to make. If Mertz, can be better and make the plays he needs to make, then Wisconsin will win. But if he continues to make the same mistakes that he's been making these last few weeks, then you can already put Wisconsin down together because there's no way they're going to win. To me, I think Michigan ekes it out. Cade McNamara is going to be a little bit better than Mertz. Mertz is going to make maybe a few mistakes, maybe not as many as last week, but it's just going to be just enough for Michigan to get past Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see where you're coming with that. I think it's going to be a good game. I mean, Michigan's looked impressive, and they're showing doubters were possibly wrong about this team because coming into the year, nobody was talking about Michigan. Like nobody. I didn't hear anybody talking about this Wolverine team. And Cade McNamara, he's been good. He's averaging over 10 yards per throw, and they're firmly in contention in this conference, in the Big Ten Conference. Michigan beat Washington, and then they beat a rising Rutgers team. Like Rutgers is not a bad team anymore. They came into that game and they only lost by 7 points, and they firmly controlled that second half against Michigan. Wisconsin was in the Penn State game, a late interception basically on the goal line. Otherwise, they might have won that game. And then last week, they were in the game against Notre Dame until the end. And then, like you said, a couple pick sixes just blew the game wide open. And they just couldn't find a way to win the game. But you know what? I'm going with Wisconsin today. I think they are finally going to put it together and get a quality win. And they're going to upset the Wolverines here at Camp Randall Stadium. Now, I believe they just changed the name to Barry Alvarez Field. Yes,
I think it's both. I think honestly, so at ASU, they have like a name for the field and for the stadium. So I think it's I think it's technically both now.
Okay. Well, either way, I mean, it's a tribute to their former coach. But I'm going with Wisconsin here. So we're our first disagreement here. You're going with Michigan. I'm going with Wisconsin. So let's keep it rolling, though. We have some, like I said, a lot of fun games. This one is particularly important to a lot of our TWSN people here. We have the Cincinnati Bearcats going to South Bend to take on the Fighting Irish. Is it fair to call this the biggest game in Cincinnati history? Because they have a real chance at winning another statement game and adding to their case to make the playoff. I mean, Ritter has been very good this season, and the Bearcats are in prime position. If they go in and win this game, and then we all assume they're going to probably roll the table because this is one of their last tough games, the nation might finally realize that this is a good team, and the committee might put them in. Like we were talking about this last week. We don't think the committee will put a team like this in, but if they can beat Notre Dame, that is a huge win. What do you think for this game?
Yeah, Matt. So first of all, I talked about the quarterbacks in my Saturday statement, and how a few of them need to be better or need to kind of show out a little bit, to prove themselves, prove their teams. This is definitely it. Desmond Ridder not only needs to prove that he's a Heisman candidate, but he needs to prove that Cincinnati is a playoff contender. And against Notre Dame, against a defense like this is the best place. This is the best way to do it. The explosive Cincinnati offense, they've averaged 44 points a game almost. But the question is, can they do it against a Power 5 defense and on top of that, a top Power 5 defense? They're multidimensional. They've got former Alabama running back Jerome Ford, who's been doing pretty well in the backfield. But Notre Dame's been pretty good on defense. They've tied the FBS lead with 9 interceptions, and they're second in 12 takeaways. The QB situation is a bit of a question mark for the Irish as well, so which gives Cincinnati an edge for sure. Drew Pine came into the game for the injured Jack Cohn last week and looked great, but we don't know who's going to play that yet this week. And unless we do, I'm just not sure. I'm pretty sure that they haven't announced anyone yet. But
yeah, I don't think they have.
Cincinnati defense is definitely no pushover. They've already had 6 interceptions already. Notre Dame run game has to at least be visible as well. They only had 3 yards against Wisconsin last week, which is not good. And they're switching in their 4th different left tackle this week. So the matchup here for sure is the Cincinnati defense against the Notre Dame offense, specifically Notre Dame O-line. We need to see how the quarterback situation evolves for Notre Dame. I think Desmond Ridder can get the job done, and I think he will get the job done. And on top of Cincinnati coming off a bye, I think they get the win, and they come out roaring. So I think they get the win by maybe 13 or more.
Wow, 13 or more.
I don't trust the Notre Dame offense too much at all.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I think Notre Dame has the better defense between the two teams, but I do think Cincinnati has the better offense between the two teams. And honestly, Ridder, I don't think is going to throw 4 picks like Mertz did last week, which really turned that game in favor of Notre Dame. But whoever wins this game, I mean, they'll have that case to be that non-Power 5 conference team for the playoff committee, because this is the game that both of these teams had circled basically on their calendars. Like whoever wins, everything is telling me to take the Irish. Like my head, everything is telling me to take the Irish because they are at home, and I need to see Cincinnati do it before I can take them. But I just can't shake this feeling that the Bearcats might be the better team. So I'm going to take the Bearcats to win this game in a close way, like by maybe a field goal or something. I'm actually going to be attending the Cincinnati game next week against Temple on Friday night. So I really hope Cincinnati wins, because then that stadium is going to be electric, and I really want to see what that's like. But I'm going with the Bearcats. We're both going with the Bearcats. So I know a lot of the
one more thing.
Going with them.
Yeah, one more thing. I definitely think that obviously the Cincinnati or the Notre Dame defense is better, but I think it's closer. The defenses are closer than the offenses are, and I think that's the difference for sure. I think that the Cincinnati offense is days ahead of Notre Dame's offense, and I think that the Black Cats defense is what they're calling them, could definitely keep up with the Notre Dame defense for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a very, very interesting game to watch. Let's keep it going. We have the Oklahoma Sooners taking on the Kansas State Wildcats. The Sooners haven't looked that impressive thus far. I've talked about it here before. I still think they're a good team. They haven't lost, but now they're going to Manhattan, Kansas. Like, not that that's like the most intimidating place to play, but it's still a road game in college football, and it's hard to win on the road. And we talked about this in our preview show. Kansas State has messed Oklahoma up 2 years in a row.
Right.
Can they make it a third time? Last year, Oklahoma had a major turnover problem. So if they can fix it, I think they'll be in good shape. I don't know if I can see them losing 3 straight years, but you know what? This is the game that we talked about. Like, what do you think? And can Kansas State beat them for a third time in a row?
Yes, that's what I was going to start off with. Kansas State is looking for a third consecutive win over Oklahoma in the last 2 years. So this is
think about, but
yeah, this is Oklahoma's only loss the last 2 to 3 years, which is nuts. To me, the biggest focal point is can the OU offense finally get rolling? Obviously, they've been good. They've been but like they haven't been Oklahoma good. They haven't been Spencer Rattler good. They haven't been as good as everyone else thought they were going to be. And this is the perfect week to get Rattler going. The Kansas State pass defense is definitely solid, but they showed noticeable cracks against Spencer Sanders and Oklahoma State last week, which we'll get into in a little bit. Kansas State also has some serious question marks at quarterback. Sooner killer Skylar Thompson within the last 2 years was injured a few weeks ago, so he won't be playing. And then their backup Will Howard was injured last week, which leaves Jaron Lewis to play quarterback. To me, with a unsure QB situation, Deuce Vaughn's gonna have to run absolutely wild, and I don't think they can lean on their run game enough to beat a good Oklahoma defense and an offense that could maybe start to get going this week. It's already not that bad. So the Sooners, I think, we're going to load the box and cause pressure, and I think OU finally finds a stride this week and wins.
Yeah, I mean, it's even crazy that we're just talking about how Kansas State could be the potential team that takes Oklahoma out of the playoff again.
It's been such a weird season.
But it's like Spencer Rattler has not looked like the Spencer Rattler that we all thought he was going to be coming to this season. I mean, you and I were both very high on this Oklahoma team going into the year. And, I backed down.
We both said they were number one.
Yeah, we both had them as our number one team in our predictions. And this Wildcat team isn't bad. I mean, they were just ranked last week, and I don't think that they should take them lightly. I don't think they will, especially because they have lost to them 2 years in a row. If Kansas State wins this game again, I think the Oklahoma program has more problems than just not making the playoff this year, because then they have a straight-up Kansas State issue. And when you are Oklahoma, you can't be losing to Kansas State. Like, once in a while, things happen. But 3 straight years, that's not acceptable. But I think the Sooners fixed their problems here today, and I'm taking the Sooners to finally show us that they're the real Oklahoma team that we've all talked about. So Sooners here, we're both agreeing on that. Now, this next game, it's a very interesting game. We have the Auburn Tigers heading to Baton Rouge to take on the LSU Tigers in a night game. Personally, I think night games in Death Valley might be one of the best atmospheres in college football. That stadium's going to be wild. The Tiger Stadium's going to be roaring. LSU, they come off of a hard-fought win over Mississippi State. The defense led the way. They've generated 18 sacks in their first 4 games for this LSU defense. And they're going to look to break through again against an Auburn offensive line, which has looked a little questionable. Derek Stingley is not playing, I believe, again. But the quarterback, Max Johnson, has shown that he's recovered from the questionable interceptions he threw against UCLA that everyone started going down on him. And Keishon Butte is becoming a star for this nation, a major spark for the LSU offense. In this battle of the Tigers, where do you see this going?
Yeah, so basically, obviously the question is about Bo Nix. We don't know if he's going to play or not. They haven't said anything. It's going to be either Bo Nix or TJ Finley, which, by the way, TJ Finley, former LSU Tiger, coming back in, if he plays for sure, he'll definitely have, something, a chip on his shoulder. He'll try to get it done against his former team. Nick struggled against Georgia State, so I don't know if I seriously think they're going to consider putting in Finley. And Finley didn't look that bad when he came in.
No, he didn't.
On top of that, Nick struggles on the road. In 11 career road starts, he only hits 54% of his passes, 12 picks, 4-11 record. Not good at all. I mean, I should have known better when I picked him against Penn State. And I mean, at home, it's completely different. 63% completion percentage, 1 interception, 10-2 record. So he just gets rattled when he's on the road. Tank Bigsby's going to need to have a day to beat LSU. Both teams number 1 and 2 in tackles for loss. So whoever can get the ball behind the line of scrimmage, I think is going to also win this game. The LSU run game is definitely also needs to improve. It's been subpar to say the least. LSU was clobbered by Auburn last year, and to me, I think LSU barely pulls it out just because of QB play. I think that even with an inexperienced TJ Finley or Bo Nix being terrible on the road, I think LSU will have enough firepower to pull this out.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that Auburn game last week quickly here, because they came very close to losing to Georgia State at home. And, there were some questionable calls that a lot of people have said they probably should have lost that game. They've been pretty resilient, this Auburn team, other than the Penn State game. But can they, like you said, can they go on the road and beat LSU? Like, Bo Nix has not been the same quarterback that he is at home, like you were saying. And I know you had faith in him a few weeks ago. But it's like it's crazy how different of a player he looks. But this is a game where if Auburn wins, we might be talking about them again in a different light, because they need to show they're a good football team. So you're going with LSU, correct?
I am going with LSU.
Yeah. Okay. So I've struggled with this game because both teams are still trying to figure things out. And I do see this kind of being a back and forth type of game, because I don't think either one of them is that much better than the other. But I'm reluctantly, and I say this again, reluctantly going with the home team backed by all of the screaming Tiger fans in Baton Rouge. This LSU team is interesting to me because there's moments where I look at them and I'm like, okay, they have a chance at doing something. But then there's also moments where I'm like, what is going on here? So I think this is a big game for both programs, because one of them is obviously going to, shoot up. If LSU wins, they're probably ranked again. If Auburn wins, they'll probably move up 1 or 2 spots, and then LSU's chances of really doing anything is kind of done. But yeah, reluctantly, I am going with the LSU Tigers to win this game by maybe a field goal or something. I just can't see them really beating Auburn by a lot. Like I said, both teams are really trying to just figure everything out still, and this is the game where I think these teams need to kind of, go up against each other and see who's the better team. But let's go back out west here. We have your Arizona State Sun Devils taking on the UCLA Bruins in a game that I'm excited for, because both teams are 3-1, and this is a game where whoever wins, that's a really big boost to their resume. And this game's going to show us which one of these teams is more of a contender and which is more of a pretender. UCLA lost to Fresno State, but then they got back on track last week, beating Stanford, and Arizona State beat Colorado. And honestly, with how inept, and I mean inept, USC has looked thus far, this game's winner is probably the front runner for the Pac-12 South. They're very similar, have strong defenses. What do you think? I mean, I know Arizona State was your pick in the Pac-12 preseason. So where are you going with this game?
Yeah, so just like you said, I mean, it's all about who's the pretender and who's the contender. In the preseason, no one was looking at UCLA. I mean, no one. They weren't even ranked. They came off a good Hawaii win, in the first day of college football. people are like, okay, maybe this UCLA team is pretty good. They come back, they beat LSU. At that time was ranked. They're like, okay, UCLA is good. They're ranked. Then they barely beat Fresno State, who now is a good team. Okay, UCLA is good. But to be quite honest with you, this is definitely for the Pac-12 South Marbles, by the way. To be quite honest with you, I feel like ASU is still the better team. I think they're definitely more talented. They've been unbelievable in the run game, but UCLA is one of the better rush defenses in the nation. They're only allowing 63.8 rushing yards a game. Fresno State was able to open up the run game against them because of a dangerous pass attack. ASU is a little worse, definitely worse than Fresno State's, but I feel like Jaden Daniels can get it done and open up that game just like Fresno State did. And as long as Herm Edwards and company can open up the game like that and play call, to open up the game like that, then they should be okay, at least for me. As for UCLA, the run game got going against last week against Stanford. After Fresno State took it away, like you said, Charbonnet and I think his name's Britton, right? The second guy, have been explosive all year. They've got one of the better run games as well. So I think this game's going to be decided on the ground as well. Dorian Thompson-Robinson has definitely been heating up in the second half in every game. He has been lights out, considerably better than in the first half of every game. But to me, UCLA is not facing an aggressive defense like ASU's. As long as ASU stays away from what killed them against BYU, which was penalties and,
Did we lose you, Anthony? I think we might have lost Anthony for a minute.
Do you hear me, Matt?
No, you paused and we couldn't hear anything.
Okay, yeah, I got that too. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Technical difficulties, everyone.
Okay.
I think we got it fixed.
And yeah, the point is I think ASU wins the game.
All right. Well, I think the Bruins have a weak pass secondary, and I think Arizona State can exploit this. But for UCLA, if they're going to win this game, they need to stick with the run game because they went away with it. They kind of went away with it against Fresno State, and look what happened. Fresno State beat them, but then they kind of went back to it against Stanford, and UCLA won. I think this is going to be a good game. It's going to be a high-scoring game. I'm going with the Sun Devils here because I really think that they can exploit that secondary of UCLA, and I think they'll make one play more than UCLA's defense can. And they're going to go into Pasadena and get this huge win and get back on track. I have Arizona State winning by a touchdown. So your prediction here, based on both of us, is still alive for your Sun Devils over there.
I hope so. And there's still a chance. It's going to be hard for them if they make it to the Pac-12 championship to beat Oregon, but there's definitely still a chance.
Yeah, I mean, this is the game that's going to kind of tell us pretty much because, like I said, USC has been awful. So they're probably out of the Pac-12 race.
Colorado, their offense doesn't look too hot, and
Utah's lost a couple games. So this is the game for these teams in the South. But let's go to another game. We have the Boston College Eagles going up against the Clemson Tigers. Anthony, is it fair to say that Clemsoning is back? Because we have not heard that term in about 4 to 5 years. But prior to that, to Deshaun Watson, Clemsoning was a thing. They always found a way to lose. And is it fair to say this is back, or is this just a product of this season? What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure at this point. I feel like I was leaning on Clemson finally bouncing back and winning a game here at home. I mean, Boston College is without their main quarterback in Phil Dracovic, even though they've looked good with their backup. I just feel like Clemson finally needs to. I think Dabo Swinney is just gonna, tell his team. I can't even get any words out. That it's time to get going. Clemson, obviously, they're a top team coming into the season. I mean, they played Georgia very well. To me, this is a game where Clemson not really blows out Boston College, but shows their true colors finally. Ucla shows that he's a Heisman candidate, even though he's definitely not going to win now. No. I think Clemson will definitely get this game rolling. I don't know about you, but I think they get it done finally.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson, they have played awful through their first few weeks, and it's really showed. When was the last time we saw a Clemson team ranked 25th? again,
I think this is their
5, 6
longest
years ago. Like we
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
seen this, and you know, it's been weird because their playoff chances are dead. Like when they lost to NC State, their playoff chances died with that loss, and so did the ACC.
They were kind of dead when they lost to Georgia, but that's that too.
Yeah, but you could have made the case if they kept winning and some other teams lost, they might have been able to sneak in,
Maybe.
But the
Yeah,
ACC's chances are pretty much dead at this point to get into the playoff. Clemson's defense has been really good. We've seen that. But their offense has been awful. And while I understand losing a generational talent like Trevor Lawrence, it might take some time to recoup, but this has been really bad. Like this offensive line is not protecting. They can't really throw the ball. Like they can't run the ball. It's been weird to watch. And, going into the season, our guy Harrison, he talked about Boston College as one of his surprise teams. And this is a great chance to prove him right for this Eagles team. Upset Clemson that has terrorized the ACC. And I mean, terrorized them for years and get a really good quality win. However, I'm going with Clemson like you. I think they're going to bounce back here after hearing all of the trash talking and down on them all week long. I think they're going to win here. I think they're going to win convincingly. I think they win by about 14 to 20 points at home and prove their record to 3-2 and get everyone off their back at least for a week because this Boston College team is not bad. So beating Boston College, I think they can show that, okay, we're not dead just yet. As far as, as a actual like good team, not playoff teams.
Yeah. And credit to Harrison too. He made this prediction before Phil Dracovic went down. And even with Dracovic being down, they're still 4-0. I mean, they've had a great season. He was at the game last week, the Missouri Boston College game. He called it. He saw how good they played and, how they won in overtime. So credit to him for sure. He definitely had a point with Boston College, but I think their luck kind of runs out here. I think Clemson finally gets it under control.
I agree. But all I will say, if Boston College wins this game, Harrison, if you're watching or you go back and watch this, you better be talking about the Eagles next week because you made that prediction. And we'll see if they can prove you right here. But let's talk about a game we I talked about in my Saturday statement. We have Baylor going up against Oklahoma State, both ranked teams, which is a little surprising because we didn't see this coming, especially Baylor. But Baylor's look good. They beat Iowa State, but they did let the Cyclones back into the game last week at the second half. Like the Cyclones purely dominated them in like the end of the third into the fourth quarter, and they almost came back and won the game. This is going to be a really tough test going out to Stillwater to take on this Cowboys team. But what do you think about this game? And do you see Oklahoma State winning? Do you see Baylor continuing their surprise season? Where are you going with this? I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I was on mute. First of all, Matt, thank you. Kudos to Baylor. I didn't think they could beat Iowa State. I thought Iowa State was one of my one of the teams I thought was really going to do well this year, maybe surprise people and somehow sneak into the college football playoff. Obviously, that's not the case now with losing to Iowa and then losing to Baylor again last week. There's no way they have any shot. But
it's been a very disappointing season for the Cyclones.
Definitely, and for Matt Campbell too. Again, kudos to Baylor. They're 4-0 now with a chance to even make a bigger splash. The offense hasn't really rolled, especially last week, but the D held firm against a really good game, really good offense with Breece Hall and Brock Purdy, and they made the most of every opportunity, which is what matters. For Oklahoma State, they looked great against Kansas State. That was really the first time Kansas State let up that many yards or that good of a passing game against anyone. Spencer Sanders finally looks good. He looked like the quarterback that Oklahoma State was expecting the last 2 or 3 years. For this game, I think Oklahoma State ultimately pulls it out at home. I think Sanders continues his good run. I think Baylor's good, but I don't see them being, anything better than what they are now. Just like I don't want to say last week's win was a fluke, but I definitely think that Oklahoma State is the better team, and Sanders is going to help them pull it out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna agree with you. Oklahoma State, they played well last week, as you said, against Kansas State. Spencer Sanders went 24 of 34 for 344 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was an impressive showing for him. And if he can keep this up, this Cowboy team can be dangerous in this conference. As I mentioned earlier, they control their own destiny. They play all the teams that are in front of them. If they could beat most of them, they have one loss going into the Big 12 title game. Who knows? Maybe this Cowboy team can get a shot at the playoff. And I'd be all for it because I would love to see this team get to the playoffs. It feels like every year they're
I feel like college football,
and then they never do anything.
Yeah, I feel like college football is always better with, I said college football is always better with an Oklahoma State in, being good, or like with a Mike Gundy being in the mix. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see other teams winning than just the ones that we normally see. I like what I've seen from this Baylor team thus far, but I do think Oklahoma State's the better team between the two of them. So give me Oklahoma State to win this game by about 14. I think they'll show that they're for real and they're going to move up in the rankings a little bit. But we like to talk about some underrated games that we have here. So Anthony, what are your underrated games for this weekend?
So usually we don't talk about these underrated games. We just for context for the viewers, Matt and I and Harrison also, we kind of like keep a secret from each other until we get into the show.
Yep.
Just so like we don't really take the games from anyone. I actually told Matt kind of accidentally this week what my favorite game, at least the under the radar game that I liked this week, and it was Florida Kentucky. Florida last week came off of almost a really good win against Alabama. They barely pulled out. They missed a 2-point conversion to basically tie the game. Kentucky was one of my under the radar SEC teams, along with Ole Miss this year. I love Will Levis. They haven't looked too good against Chattanooga and other teams. But their run defense has been solid, and Florida, all they do is run. Missouri was able to throw it for close to 300 yards against Kentucky, but for the most part, the defense was tough up front, only allowing 104 yards. Kentucky, I think their offense can finally explode. They haven't really the last few weeks, especially against this Florida team, who, again, I think is pretty overrated. Even though they did keep up with Alabama, I think that was more of a fault on Alabama than it was Florida staying in the game. I think the Florida offense is just too one-dimensional, and I think Kentucky can exploit some holes in the defense as well. So I'm going to go Kentucky-Florida and see. Hopefully it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, no, that definitely will be a good game. And then Kentucky takes on LSU next week at home as well. So Kentucky has a couple chances to prove themselves. So I have two games, one of which it's more or less just for the better team. It's Oregon taking on Stanford. This is the one I told Anthony, and then I have a second one I did not tell him about. Obviously Oregon has looked really good this year. Stanford took down USC, but then they lost to UCLA. But this should be a fun game because they typically play each other pretty well, and Oregon don't take Stanford lightly, because if they do, the same fate that happened to USC could maybe happen to Oregon here. But if they come in, focus, which I think they will, because I know they have UCLA on the schedule in a couple weeks. This should be an easy win for the Ducks, but if not, the tree might surprise everyone. And I love watching that mascot run up and down the sidelines. And it's possibly my favorite mascot in college football, just because I just love everything about it. But for my second game, I have Louisville taking on Wake Forest. Anthony, do you know who the best team in the ACC record-wise is?
Wake Forest, the ranked
Demon Deacons here. I believe they are tied with Boston College for record. But I believe Wake Forest has a conference win or two, so they're higher in the standings.
Right, yeah.
This Wake Forest team has been the quietest ranked team all season. Like, honestly, nobody's talking about them, and I think they deserve some recognition. They have been very steady, and they will look to continue their winning ways today against the Cardinal. They handled Virginia, who just beat Miami. Miami's a whole other conversation, though. And Florida State, which hasn't been good either. But for a Wake Forest program to be 4-0, I believe they are right now, that's pretty good. And they still have matchups against Clemson, NC State, North Carolina, and Boston College coming up. And this could be a really fun season for this Demon Deacons program if they continue winning, especially because not a lot of people really talked about them, as I mentioned. So keep an eye on that game, Wake Forest taking on Louisville. That could be a really fun game today. But Anthony, anything else you want to touch on here?
Not really. I think today's gonna be a great day of college football. This is arguably one of the better weeks that we're gonna have all this whole season. So I definitely just cannot wait to sit at home and watch some college football.
Right. Yeah. No, same here. So that'll do it for us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Once again, make sure you download the TWSN mobile app so you don't miss any content or anything put out by our writers, analysts. And again, as Anthony mentioned earlier in the show, we have our Patreon betting service. Help us help you make money. Subscribe. We want to help make you money. So, and then next week, we should have Harrison back, and I would love to hear his thoughts on some of these games. But then again, thank you everyone for joining. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the college football games. It's going to be a fun one. And we will see you next week on another episode of the TWSN Tailgate. We are out.